And so one of the first things that you do when you go to basic training is they talk to you about like military operations in an urban terrain, right? That's MOUT training, okay? So what that means is that it's not like in Vietnam anymore or anything like that. It's actually like, hey, we are going into places at the time, into places in Iraq. You need to know how to clear a house. You need to know how to clear an entire building. Like, you need to understand this. And so what they did is that they taught us this concept called the fatal funnel, right? And the fatal funnel is that it's just like it says, like it comes down into the middle and then goes back out, and that doorway is in the middle of this funnel that goes on either side. And this fatal funnel is where you kind of like, you live or die. You have to go into that funnel in order to go inside of the house and clear the room. But what you have to do is that you have to move in and out very quickly. So with that training, I learned, like, okay, cool, you kind of go in there and kind of figure this out. And it was very funny because that same concept of being able to move in and out of the funnel very quickly also applied to what I was going to be learning as an interrogator.
Welcome everybody, Paramify podcast.
Woo,
let's do it.
Let's go.
Let's go, man.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Paramify podcast. I'm Kenny Scott
I'm
with Keaton.
Yep. Dude.
And we're here with Reade King, my new friend that I made last year.
Yes. Indeed.
Randomly.
Yes.
Haphazardly even.
It was,
yeah.
That whole scenario was actually, I still look back on that because there's occasionally, due to my background and everything else, I get a little bit salty when I'm out like on my own and I'm traveling and I'm in a bad mood and everything else, and I'm supposed to be this salesperson, and I'm sitting there, and it was super funny because I'm there getting ready to take off to like Washington D.C., and sure enough, I go park my car, bring my bag over. I'm already kind of like in a bad mood because I've got to go and do this stuff back in D.C., going to be away from the house, and then I see this guy, and I notice that he looks at me, and I'm like, just ignore him. Just ignore him. Don't talk to him. Don't look at him. And sure enough, and he took that as like, kind of like, hey, well, let's take this as a point of like enablement here. I'm going to go ahead and this empowered him a little bit. And he just said, how's it going, man? And I knew it right then. I'm like, man, I was like, it's going fine. How are you? And we started talking a little bit about where I was going. I'm going to Washington, D.C. What is it that you do? I asked him what he did, and he said, well, I mean, have you ever heard of FedRAMP? And lo and behold, that was exactly what we were going through at my previous company.
You're in a really bad mood.
I was in a really bad mood, like, because there's all of these deals that we were going through, and it's like, hey, where are you in this process, right? Where are you with your company as far as like FedRAMP? Are you FedRAMP high? Are you intermediate? Where are you at? And it was, like, we are dealing with that as it stands right now. And obviously you see like his sales ears just kind of perk up, and he's like, well, let me tell you what we do.
I was so bad at the time.
It was fine. It was absolutely perfect. And it just so happened that we had started a process. And again, I was so far removed from that entire process.
Yeah.
And when I did actually go in and start talking to them, they're just like, oh, I think we already have a solution for that. Where I wasn't sure if they did or not. But she wasn't going to tell me anything.
Yeah.
So then, so yeah, and I mean, I'll get into like how I ended up in that space in the first place, but I mean, that's where I'm at, like right there. And then he mentioned, well, do you know Adam Lancaster?
Yeah, because you were like, you
right.
said I'm from Star Valley.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, dude, Adam Lancaster, my homie.
Yep.
Right? What's his company now? He had Roost or whatever.
He started something.
I don't know.
And but he's doing his thing.
You're amazing.
He's grinding.
Love
he's
you.
grinding, doing a great thing.
He's on Instagram a lot.
I see him all the time with his red chucks on and everything else. Like
totally.
His selling shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was where we kind of made that connection. And then I immediately, when I jumped on, I'm like, I jumped on my phone and I immediately was like, hey, do you actually know this guy? And he was like, I do know that guy. And so we had it was really funny. But then just jumped on the plane and came back, and when there was a riff at my company.
Yeah.
That occurred like in April of this year.
Dude, how many are there's so many.
There's a ton.
It's still going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, like, did you know that there was like what was it? And I may have told you this before, but there was actually, Stanford had done a little bit of like research on that, and they started saying like, hey, why do people go through these huge rifts that are occurring? And the reason is because everybody else is doing it. It's literally,
What?
it's literally following the trend.
Yeah.
Like, well, hey, big company over here went through a riff. We need to do a riff too.
We better do it
We
too.
better do
They
this too.
see something we don't.
That's it. And
That's
it's
insane.
it's the stupidest thing
That is
I've
dumb.
heard of. I've ever heard of. And I
Yeah.
saw that and just was blown away. When I saw that, I brought that up to like a couple of different people, and it happens. It absolutely
Yeah.
happens.
Wow.
In this scenario with this company, that riff was a little bit tied to something else, and there was a couple other things that kind of went down and
Yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, they're still moving along, and
Yeah.
and at that time, like, Kenny called me up and he's just like, hey, let's get together, let's meet, let's talk.
Yeah, who cares about like whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like the relationship, like I thought this guy's cool, man. And he's in the space.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, for the
Yeah.
most part, yeah. In that space, I was.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun being able to get to know him, because I was like, sat down and started talking, and I really was. I was a bit abrupt, in fact, if I recall.
Yeah.
And I was like, so what did you want to talk about? Like, why'd you bring me
Yeah.
here, man? And he's like, honestly, I just wanted to get to know you. And that's what, honestly, Kenny, that's what resonated with me the most, is
Yeah.
that you were that committed to building a relationship
Yeah.
with me, that I felt incredibly terrible, for one. And then I was like, this is a guy that I definitely want to make sure that I'm connected with. And so
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started following all the things, and I saw, like, the Paramify stuff coming up consistently in my feed, and started looking at the YouTube stuff and everything else. And I was like, dude, these guys, like, they're doing great things, for one, in the space. And then the other piece is just like, it looks like they're having a lot of fun going out there and just talking to people and about
Yeah.
random stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, guilty, man.
Superman.
We are having a ton of fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no, I really appreciate you, Reade. So cool. All right, man. So you got a really awesome background, right? And in particular, that's why we wanted to have you on here, for selfish reasons also.
Okay, perfect. I love it.
Yeah. But tell us a little bit. So you have an interesting background. So you're ex-military,
Yeah.
right? And that got you into DoD, right?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how you got a background in DoD and how it
Okay.
led to sales.
All right.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about
Man,
your
so
background.
we're gonna rewind all the way back
Let's
to
go.
2005. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Alright.
2005. Like most young men at the time, I was out doing summer sales for a security company that was located right here in Provo. It was
Okay.
called Pinnacle Security, and then
Hey.
I think they got bought out by like Protection
Yeah.
One, and I think they're still in business somewhere.
I remember Pinnacle.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to school back then
Yeah,
in Provo.
Yeah, same. That's
Yeah.
what I got. I got talked into it. I was in University of Utah at the time, and then I got talked
Yeah.
into going to this company. So anyway, so I went and sold, and I had the worst experience ever.
Perfect.
Like, it was talking about doing sales and everything. I just got this worst taste in my mouth ever when I did sales.
Yeah.
And everybody used to say, like, hey, Reade, you're very personable. You should try to go out and do sales. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, not only no, but like, hell no. No, I'm not doing this, right? I'm not going to do that. Like, there's no way, because it's just not a thing I'm going to do, because I just had that much of a bad experience. So then, fast forward, just I ended up going to school in Provo, ended up joining the military, and one of the things that I wanted to do is that I wanted to learn a language, and I wanted to go out and be an interrogator, and that's what I did. They call it human intelligence collection, is what I ended up doing. Ended up learning a couple languages. Ended up learning Mandarin and French.
Oh my gosh!
Both with the military, and then I started to get into it. And I love interacting with people, navigating personalities, all of this stuff. It's amazing. And so one of the first things that you do when you go to basic training is they talk to you about like military operations in an urban terrain, right? That's MOUT training, okay? So what that means is that it's not like in Vietnam anymore or anything like that. It's actually like, hey, we are going into places at the time, into places in Iraq. You need to know how to clear a house. You need to know how to clear an entire building. Like, you need to understand this. And so what they did is that they taught us this concept called the fatal funnel, right? And the fatal funnel is that it's just like it says, like it comes down into the middle and then goes back out, and that doorway is in the middle of this funnel that goes on either side. And this fatal funnel is where you you live or die. You have to go into that funnel in order to go inside of the house and clear the room. But what you have to do is that you have to move in and out very quickly. So with that training, I learned, okay, cool, you kind of go in there and kind of figure this out. And it was very funny because that same concept of being able to move in and out of the funnel very quickly also applied to what I was going to be learning as an interrogator, right? Because as an interrogator, you have to be able to, if you imagine that same type of funnel that's coming down, right? almost like an hourglass type of thing. But in that middle, that's the piece of intel that you're always trying to grab. And so what you do is that you start up here at the top talking about just rapport. And then as you continue to start moving your way down, you whittle your way down into that piece of information that you're supposed to be grabbing as an intelligence person. And then what you do is that you don't end right there. You have to actually work your way back out, right? So you have to move in. You can't stay there because if you stay right in that middle, just like in the fatal funnel, you'll get shot, right? You'll die.
Okay.
And so you move your way back out, and then by the time you finish the conversation, the person was like, that was a really good piece of conversation that I had with Reade. And then that's it. They don't know what you've been trying to gather from them, okay? So fast forward, I go out, I deploy, I go to Iraq in 2010, leading my own team, had a great time. I get done, I go back and get my degree. I start doing counterintelligence, where you investigate national security crimes, things like that. Learned how to do that, and then led the schoolhouse that was, one of 3 schoolhouses in the nation. And I was out there and did a little bit of recruiting, did a whole bunch of this and that. And then 2020 hits. And 2020 hit was pretty hard on our family, in that what happened is that my daughter had a hemorrhagic stroke. She almost died.
I remember that.
Yeah, and what ended up happening is that she was able to recover, and she's doing much better, but that just really hit me hard about, like, how am I measuring success, right?
Yeah.
And it's bad when traumatic things like that happen, and that's when we're actually measuring, like, how am I measuring success?
Yeah.
Right.
And so at that point, I said, hey, I don't think I'm going to keep working full time for the Guard, and so I started working for a local company over here at Silicon Slopes, and they gave me a chance. I'll even shout out to them, like Job Nimbus, did a great job. Gave me a chance to, like, go out there and kind of spread my wings a little bit. And then when I was there, I found myself back in that seat of being able to gather intel. But this time I couldn't see anybody, right? I had to just sit there and just do it on the phone.
It's
And
like
so
remote.
just remote, right? And so what I did is that
What happened in 2020 again?
something weird, something
Yeah,
happened,
yeah.
something happened.
Weird.
Yeah.
And so this was 2021, so it was just post that, right?
Right.
And so they were still like, hey, you have the choice. You can come in if you want. You don't have to, but
Okay.
you can come in. So most of the time I wanted to go in just because I liked the energy, right? And I think, Keaton, you can probably speak to that as well, like being in business development. There's an energy when it comes to sales that you can
Absolutely.
just continue to kind of move through, and you felt the same thing.
Yeah, it's
But
fun, man.
It's a lot of fun being able to kind of
So
move through
fun.
that. It's so. Anyway, so I rolled in and I started to, like, go through this process, and I saw these folks, like, jumping on these calls, and I would see them just like smile and dial, right? That's the thing you often hear is in, like, an SDR, right? Smile and dial. You just move your way through it. And I noticed that they weren't doing any type of, like, they weren't looking up to people, they weren't trying to find out additional things, like they mentioned, like, maybe a couple of the problems, but that was it, right? So I'm like, so I started utilizing those same things that I did as an interrogator, which is like
The fatal funnel?
the fatal funnel, right? So I started off with doing, like, the whole start up at the top.
Lower stakes, though, right?
Lower stakes, right? Nobody's shooting at me this time, right? Nobody's going to try to kill me. But I followed those same things, that it was like, hey, I start up at the top, and what you do is that you find out a little bit of information beforehand, before you even pick up the phone, right? So you find out that information. Once you get them on the phone, you start asking questions and determining what their needs are. And as you start working your way down, what you work down to in that middle piece of intel that we're talking about beforehand is their pain, right? But the problem is, and you've probably seen this before, once you get to that pain, people immediately start to, like, throw out features. Here's what we do. And they start throwing out, like, hey, here's what we can do. We can answer, we can get you taken care of. But the problem is that if you ever think about a time that you've ever been vulnerable with somebody about information, and they just continue to, like, start talking about that vulnerability, and it's like poking a nerve, right? And it hurts. And so people tend to get, like, if you do actually close the cell at that point, I started noticing that almost immediately people would get buyer's remorse call back and say, no, I don't want this.
Yeah.
I feel like they were duped, right?
Yeah.
And so what I
Manipulated,
started, that's it,
right?
right? And so one of the things, and I said, because I would feel the same way. But the fact is that what I started doing, and the big difference that I was kind of making there, was that I found out what the pain was, and then what I would do is I would start talking about value. When I figured that out and figured out what their motivation was, what was the big key thing, I started talking, moving my way back out that funnel, and start talking about value props, but I wouldn't tie it to the pain, I would tie it back to their need. Because what you've done is that you've now been able to make an emotional attachment to the value proposition. And when you keep bringing up the need, you're not poking on the pain, but you're actually talking about like, this is what we're going to answer.
Yeah.
And in that way, what you've done is that you've been able to actually offer up like a way for them to be able to resolve that pain. And you're not constantly reminding them of it, but you're saying like, here's the need, and then it reminds them of like, oh my goodness, like that's how I can get that solved. And then you kind of end on the value prop and ROI and all those other things.
That makes sense. I think the difference between, maybe selling like a door-to-door sales, right? Like if it's like a quick, smaller transaction, some of them are bigger, right?
Yeah.
But smaller transaction, I mean, that's going to be, maybe it is just the pain and I'm like, oh yeah, you have it.
Yeah.
You give it to me right now. Like, good.
100%.
I'll never see you. There's no relationship.
Yeah.
But anything when it comes to security and software, these are long-term solutions. And so I like, it is there does need to be a relationship. That's the funnest part of business is relationships to me. Not to everybody. Some people just don't want to be around people. But that's the best part about building a business is the relationship. And so it can't be a manipulation at all. It has to be like, I don't even care if I sell to you.
Yep.
I know that if I give love, man, it's going to come back eventually, somehow.
And
right?
that was one of the things I found that if, because I started going out and I started realizing that, that sales is more than that, right? It's more, sales is a lot more than just that transactional type thing, because in many cases, there is that's transactional key piece. And that was one of the things that was very pushed in that whole process of being able to push that idea of like, we want to build relationships, we don't want to build transactions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because as we build relationships, I mean, I can't remember, you had one guest that came on that he was the lawyer.
Oh, dude, Josh.
Barron.
One of the most brilliant people ever.
So when Josh was talking about that whole bit about like, all you have to do is that if you give somebody a top tier white glove experience, it's going to pay off as time continues to go on, right?
Right.
It's always that thing. And that's what the leadership at my first SaaS gig was doing, is that he's like, we want these people to be as successful as possible. And if you have that attitude of doing that, that's how you can be able to make sure that you're always going to be we're going to bring more people in. And that really resonated with me quite a bit.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things that we continued to do, and I continued to kind of utilize a lot of that same stuff as I went on from there. I went from sales into sales enablement because of my training background and because of what I'd done in the military. They were saying like, hey, we think you'd be a good fit if you want to come over to sales enablement. We were able to kind of get people ramped up within 6 weeks, whereas before it was like 12. It was really good. Like we were able to make like a lot of really good movements and being able to get them trained up, get them onboarded quickly, and help them understand like what it was that we're trying to get done. Then I got recruited out of there to a company back east, and then I was working with there until April of this year.
Nice.
And the same thing, but the difference was that now I went from something that was semi-transactional to all relationship. Because if you all have noticed, like when you're working with somebody within the DoD, like it is all like you have to know somebody. Most of these people are like, hey, they may have really great marketing, but unless you are building that relationship the entire time, like it takes a while. Like it is very slow. Your sales cycle, as you probably know, like it can be 18 months to 2 years. For a cycle.
Absolutely.
That's
pain.
That was ridiculous to me. That was so crazy. But then obviously being in the military, I was like, that makes a lot of sense because I was working like the budget side. I did have to understand the different colors of money and how those changed and if they could change.
Can you talk a little bit about that for
Sure.
us, like plebes? Like we don't know.
So when you're talking about budgets, right?
Right.
So at the very beginning of a year, like a fiscal year, right? Because fiscal year starts on like October 1, right? Every year.
Okay.
October 1, so that's, we're already...
Dang it, we already missed it.
That's okay.
Shoot, okay.
Now is the time. So here's the thing, is that they'll give you the budget at the very beginning of October 1.
Okay.
And every quarter, they say, okay, how are you doing on your budget? Right? It's not a matter, because sometimes they'll say like, hey, we've already allotted our budget for the full year. Mm-hmm. But the good part about it is that if you come in and you say, hey, I have this thing that I want to do, they might come forward and say to you, well, Scott, I can't do that. That color of money has already been used over here. So that's all I've got.
The color of money?
Yeah, because money has different colors, because there's going to be a certain amount of money that goes to computers.
Okay.
There's going to be a certain amount of money
it.
that goes to facilities. There's going to be a certain amount of money that goes to food. There's all these different colors of money that have different things. So you might come forward and you might say, hey, I've got this thing that I want to be able to do. Well, that color of money has already been spent. Okay, cool. But what about these other things? What about this? What about this thing for, what they call like NASA soup? And what about like you've got like a small business, a small business type of fund that you can be able to go out there and do pilot operations with certain type of software and things like that. SIBRs is what they call them, right?
Okay.
I can do a SIBR, and I can do NASA soup, and I can do this. Well, all these things combined, they're like, okay, cool. Well, then, let's go ahead and let's have a conversation, right? So sometimes that would come up, and then what'll happen is that every single quarter they'll say like, hey, Scott, are you using all your money? Hey, okay, it's the end of second quarter, are you using all your money? They'll come in and they'll make sure that you're using it. Yeah. And if it's not being used, right, if your money's not being used, they'll take that away from you next year. So you have to expend on all money, right?
Just spend it.
And so then
you want to be on the receiving end.
That's right. And then there's times where what would happen is that you start going in, and in May time frame, I mean, you guys can go ahead and like test me on this, fact check me. But if you start talking to your DoD folks in May time frame and start saying like, hey, are you going to execute on all of Q4? That's the time.
Okay.
That's the time. March to May. Start checking out and start talking to your DoD folks. Are you guys going to execute? Do you have any extra funds? Because many of them, they have to spend that money. Right. But they're not going to get it the following year. So they will say like, well, tell me what it is that you've got. Like, what's going on, right? And these are for your DoD entities, right?
Yeah.
For your contractor folks, that's what they're all on all cylinders all the time, trying to make sure they're talking to those guys. So like, when it came down to like your NASA soup, your SIBRs, your all of these things that you're trying to like work, I had no idea that was a thing. But my contracting folks who had been working in like GSA and working in all these other fields within the DoD were like, hey, we know all about that. And if you can be able to make that a little bit smoother, like, hey, if you want to be able to make sure that you can be up for this program, you need to make sure that you're FedRamped. And you need to make sure that you're FedRAMP high. Because if you're FedRAMP high, that means that you can be able to get access to all of these other programs, right? And many of them, if you're saying like, hey, we want to do this, I know that you're going to be reaching out to some of these folks come March and May and everything else. Let me come in here and let me make sure that this gets integrated Q1, Q2, and then that way you guys are going to be ready for your end of year sweeps.
Got it.
A little bit of verbiage for you.
Yeah, no. I'm just wondering like what color compliance documentation is. What color is it? Like, nasty diarrhea brown.
I'm pretty sure it's something like that. So I'm pretty sure it's something like that.
Is it? No offense to like University of Wyoming, right? But like I was just thinking like a color, right? Like
that is an ugly color. That's why I didn't go there.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Great people, right? Sorry,
great people,
dude. Oh my gosh, dude. Maybe we can edit it out, right? Love you guys.
Nothing wrong with University. Nothing wrong with the Pokes.
Love Adam. Yeah, Adam loves the Pokes, right?
Good for him.
Good for him, man. Yeah, good for you, Adam. Good
for you. Hey, it was. I'm just saying, Utah was a little bit closer than Laramie.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, dude, that's just okay. Never mind. Let's not. No more hate. Okay, so what color? Okay, so
when you're talking about, that's what they're talking about, the color of money, right?
Color of
money. So what you'll do is that you'll come forward and you'll say, hey, I want to offer you software stuff. And they're like, well, that money's already been taken. But if you're aware that a government entity has like this extra money over here, and say like, how do we get that changed? Well, that's a long process.
Got it.
Right. So that's what contractor companies like the one that I worked for, that's what they were dealing with, is that we would go in and we'd say, hey, we have this really great software on, to actually take care of your penetration testing, like automated penetration testing.
Yeah.
We have this software that can be able to do this. We've already spent all that, right? And we've got like this competitor and this competitor that we're currently using, and this person beat this one. Okay, cool. How long is that going to be? Well, it's going to be for the next like 3 years, or it's going to be for the next year, or whatever. And at that point, we say, okay, well, are you aware of like, we can be able to apply for a SIBR piece of funding, or we can do NASA soup and be able to offer up a pilot for you or something to be able to offer this up to you and let you see what we're doing, and you can do a side-by-side comparison. And then if we need to, because that NASA soup is a different color of money than this.
Wow.
right, than what they use for their software. And because a lot of times, like you have, coming from a training environment, money is a completely different color of money, right? And so what happens is that if somebody comes in, say a government entity, the Army, says, hey, I'm noticing that this organization over here has all this training money. I want to take it and use it over here. Well, training funds are like super, like very coveted. Like you don't touch training money. And so if you try to take that money and move it over here, they get very upset. They get really, really upset about that. So anyway.
Okay. So that sounds like really hard. Like, man, that's going to be crazy. So we need people.
You can tell why I don't work for the Army.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think there's no substitute for experience there. I'm just wondering. Yeah.
But anyway, but that's how I ended up getting into this, and then had that riff, and then I applied for this position over with Anonyome Labs.
Yeah,
which is where I'm at currently. I'm was one of their first salespeople over there.
Yeah, tell us about it. Yeah,
love to hear about that.
Yeah, so Anonyome Labs started back in 2014, right? They've been in business for a minute, and what they started off with is a really solid product. They deal with primarily data privacy, right? So it's just being able to protect data. They started off with a direct-to-consumer app that they did for years, and then a few years ago, what they did is that through their connections and different things, they were able to go out and determine, like, hey, we've got a really good B2B type product here that we could probably help out with. So they went out and they captured a few through some relationships and things like that. Captured some really big names. Like one of them is like like is in the top five, one of the top 5 insurance carriers. We're able to kind of like tack on some of our stuff to them. So, and the way some of the features that I'm referring to are going to be like your VPN, your safe web browsing, your end-to-end encryption, creating pseudos so that people don't have to continue to use their own information. Right, so it's one of those ways that they can still protect their PII, their personally identifiable information, and being able to make sure that they can still interact in our world, because it is so much information. Because so much information nowadays, like data breaches and things like that. I mean, you've got your data brokers that are out there selling all of your information out there for pennies on the dollar to just anybody who will take it all the time, right? You've got the Instagram algorithm that's listening to us right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's gonna talk about like the color. It's gonna
come up with something.
Something University of Wyoming, like MBA.
Yeah, it's gonna come
like
up.
That.
University of MBA. Yep.
Yeah.
I usually like to sneak in and like just try to whisper on my wife's phone.
Let's see.
Chuck Taylor's.
Right? Nice.
That's what I try to do. So it'll pop up on her. On her feed.
But nothing yet.
But that's what we that's what we normally delve into, and that's what I was asked to do, is to come in and kind of say, okay, we've got these verticals, right? And our verticals are insurance, software security, and now recently fintech. And so we're talking to financial institutions and talking to them about our stuff. Did you find it?
I got a Paramify ad.
Let's go.
Perfect.
This one Keaton just made.
I did see that. Yeah.
I love it.
The SSP, yeah. I saw that on
Don't those, oh my gosh. This is one of my favorite ones you did.
McMahon. Yes. Oh man. But
that guy is the king of memes, dude.
Oh, he really is. I see him on all sorts of stuff. The whole funny thing is, like, I know a guy in the military that kind of looks like him.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, and he's just as scary. So yeah, scary looking dude. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now, and that's what I do with them. Is that primarily we're kind of delving into that whole idea of know your customer, the whole KYC thing.
Right.
Tons of KYC people that are out there right now. But what we're trying to do to differentiate ourselves is to be able to talk about the reusableness. That's the wrong word. But to be able to reuse those KYC credentials in the app, online, in the branch, being able to help those build that customer teller confidence, so that when somebody comes into the branch, they're immediately be able to identify it. We can start working through those, reduce that friction, so that people can just have a better experience, right? And at the same time, be able to reduce costs, because on the phone, like being able to try to identify people, like when people are trying to call in, it takes time, and being able to reduce that cost and increase revenue is obviously what most financial institutions want.
I have a couple questions on that, but Keaton, I think did you have one? You're good?
Oh, yeah, I have a couple questions.
Yeah,
with that too, but
yeah. Go.
Go ahead. Yeah,
Oh,
no.
Keaton.
Yeah, I would just.
Sir.
Thank you. So yeah, when I was looking at your company's website, I saw the MySudo platform.
Yes, that's
correct?
the one.
And that's for business to consumer. Correct?
Yes, correct. So with the MySudo platform, like what you're going to see there is that's going to be like our digital identity protection kind of program, like the DIP, right?
Yeah.
And so what they're able to do is that very much taking those same features from the MySudo app with like, your ability to be able to create additional pseudos, additional emails, your VoIPs, your end-to-end encryption, and that VPN or whatever.
Yeah.
You can be able to take all of those, and with that, they're able to utilize that and be able to offer up that dip to their consumers. So
Right.
that B2B to C type movement, right? Where they're able to say like, hey, well, I want the additional protection. I want to be more proactive with my data privacy and with my information. And so they'll take that information, just go from there. So that's where you saw that. That's a pseudo platform.
Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's like all super like technical, right? So it seems like you guys are kind of building this market right now. Like you're part of this market opportunity. I know it exists and everything, but bringing people to a new opportunity takes a lot of work. It's breaking down false beliefs, or maybe not false beliefs. It's you don't want to be in the business of changing people's beliefs, right? That's like so hard.
100%. Yes.
Interesting, but you want to introduce them to the new opportunity. So how have you found ways to do that in this new?
So one of the biggest things, and you'll find that every market is going to be different, right? Because if you're trying to sell to like a banking industry or things like that,
right?
As
different than military.
It's way different than military. It's way different than, because before I was dealing with contractors, right? Contractors are individuals that they're expecting you to call them on their cell phone at any time of day, and they'll pick up, right?
That's right.
That's how contractors do it.
That's right.
That's how they keep their business going.
Right.
Banks and financial institutions, they don't do that. They're like, they will like take their sweet time getting back to you, and they have tons of people that are reaching out to them. And we have found that so far, being able to call them on the phone, and there's even been some people I've watched on LinkedIn. One of the people I was looking at straight up said, "Hey, salespeople, don't do this. Do not try to reach out. Do not try to do this. Do not try to approach me with this or that or this. I know you have a tough job. I'll get to you. I'll get to you if I need you." I was like, that seems a little bit like, egocentric, but that's fine, right? That's okay. I get it, because if there's not a need for like whatever it is, then I understand.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we found so far is being able to crack that nut is just meet them face to face. We have to go to conferences.
Yeah.
And this is one of the years, this is like one of the first years that Anonyome Labs has gone out to conferences. I believe that we've gone out to like five or six.
Oh man.
And that's what it's been. It's just been one thing after the other, and they have been so incredibly successful in doing that.
Yeah,
and it's just once you're meeting with them, and once they actually know who you are, and once you're able to talk to them about like, hey, these are the concepts that we're trying to do, because at that time it's like we're not breaking down beliefs, right? But we're adding to it. We're augmenting onto what we currently seeing in the field.
Yeah.
Right? So that's been the one way to be able to do that, right?
Because it's easier to
face.
build a relationship when you see another human versus
100%.
like, which AI bot am I talking to?
That's right.
Which
It's so crazy, because that's what people think is like and now with like the use of AI and everything else, that stuff is rampant. And so that's how do you know, like somebody in an email, I don't know if that's a real person.
I don't know.
Like that person's using AI or something like that. If it sounds flowery, if it sounds off, like it's crazy. And so a lot of people just don't really believe it. So they're just like, oh, I'll just ignore it.
Yeah.
Right.
So a couple things, right? So ultimately, there are going to be those people that are so incredibly frustrated, and that's where, like, Google Ads, they're going to find you. They're going to be like, and that's great. We love those.
Yeah.
Those are like really warm leads that come in.
100%.
But there are the other, most of it is going to be somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Where you have to establish that relationship. You mentioned conferences. We're like, well, I don't have any money to go to a conference.
Those industry days are expensive.
Yeah.
Especially in the military. Like they're like, oh my god.
Yeah, they're a lot.
Yeah.
And so I like go, and I'm like, I'm just gonna go and see who's there. And for a while, I remember the first one I went to, I didn't have any sales training at all. No sales background. I'm like a consultant, but I had no experience doing that. And so I go, And I just talk to people at their booths, and these are like salespeople that I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And so I get along with them, and they're like, "Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
This is great." And they tell me, "That's an amazing idea. Shut up, FedRAMP. Shut up."
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then I'm like, "Oh my gosh, dude, we are gonna make so many deals with." Just so many people.
Yeah.
Because they just tell you like, "Oh yeah, like that sounds awesome."
Yep.
We're just talking to salespeople. This is just so funny. Anyways, you learn, right? You
Yep.
learn early on as a
Yep.
founder, like, okay, well, maybe
Who's my ICP? Right?
Who am I targeting?
Who's my ideal customer persona?
Yeah.
I'm curious with the conferences.
Yeah.
How do you guys tend to spot your ideal customer when you're
Good question.
So when you're out there, I mean, it kind of, I use. What I normally do is that I normally just talk to anybody and everybody, right? That's the sales. That's the sales mentality. Is like more inputs. Just do more inputs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you'll find that there's going to be individuals you're going to speak to, and most people they have like a little, a little like piece, a little thing, like a little scan or QR code that you have to scan them in and whatnot. There's sometimes, and it depends. It depends on your boss. I mean, are we just going in and just walk around talking to people? What's going to be our plan?
Right.
And what we found is that by going out and just striking up conversations and just being like, hey, how's it going? How are you? And just that's it. Just being able to be willing to put yourself out there and talk to some of these folks. There are going to be times where you have to fail quickly. And you have to realize like, hey, this is a person that like, hey, this is really good talking to them, but very cordially end the conversation and then move on. Right?
Yep.
Right.
When you start talking about a technical person, right, for a dirty salesperson like myself, right, I'm not going to be able to get that deep. I know for a fact that if I start talking about too much with like SSP, with Kenny, I'm going to get lost in the sauce real quick. So I keep it like high level, right?
We just talked to a technician today. It was my favorite demo ever.
Yeah.
He's one of the foremost in FedRAMP. Like
Yeah.
he's one of the guys, like one of the godfathers of FedRAMP.
Awesome.
And so we were talking to him today, and it was the most fun ever. It was like everybody was like, yeah, he's like, hey, can we talk about SC13 and encryption tables? And I'm like, oh my gosh, can we talk about SC13? Can we talk about validation? Yes. And so we just
excited.
get into it. And anyways, it got a little out of hand, I would
It got
say.
a little
It got a little out of hand. But it was good.
Yeah.
And he loved it. And, I'm excited to work with him.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And but that's a prime example of like that's with being able to match up your persona, right?
Right.
And being able to match up with somebody's energy and things like that. And so, going in and doing your homework first. That's that find piece, this top of the funnel, top of that fatal funnel, where you're saying like, we know that these are going to be the people that we need to speak to, because we know that if I talk to a CTO, right, or if I talk to somebody or a CISO or something like that, those are going to be the individuals that are going to really care about what I'm doing. If I'm talking to somebody like that is middle management, they might be a champion, but most of the time they're not going to be holding any purse strings. They have zero to do with the decision-making process. And so at that point, that's why it's being able to understand like, hey, get to that knowledge quickly, start talking about like, hey, does this resonate with you, right?
Yeah.
How does this resonate? And they're
Absolutely.
like, it doesn't resonate at all, man. That's not going to be me. I'm not even that part. I can't tell you how many times I've been on that phone and they're like, this is not even going to be my side. What you're telling me, Reade, is very compelling, but I can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
Well, then who do I need to talk to? You need to talk
Right.
to Vicky. I was like, okay, cool. I'll call Vicky.
Okay, I'll call
And then
Vicky.
Vicky ignores me for like a couple of months, right?
Right.
And so, and then you just go out there and try to meet him. I can tell you that building up all of these different personas, and then finally we had an opportunity with one of our conferences where all of these people that were in our sweet spot were all at the same place, and then at that point, like we had our people going in and just touching base, and it was
great.
amazing.
So I'm curious with that as well. So you found a lot of success, and your team found a lot of success. You're just going out and talking to people.
Yeah.
Did you find any success in like creating a booth and going about it that way and trying to draw in people?
There is, so you have to remember, there's always going to be somebody who's going to have more money than you.
Right.
100%, right?
Yeah.
We went out and we had a booth at one of our conferences this last year, and it was successful. We considered it a success. But the very next conference that they were at, that my colleagues were at, where there wasn't a booth, they were able to go out there and talk to everybody that they needed to talk to.
Right.
Plain and simple. And so, especially talking to like talking to our finance folks, to them, it's like, okay, you had 8 meetings when we paid this much amount of money to have somebody set up a booth and have this booth set up for us. Great, people knew who we were, people saw us, that's fine. But then we put out this much money and you had like 12 meetings or 15 meetings. This is crazy. Like,
Right.
obviously, you know, and finding those right places, because, you know, it can be hit or miss. That's why it's so important to go out there and fail fast. And when you fail, try to fail with like as little much of an investment as possible, right? That's why social selling and like all of those things are important to continue to do, because you've literally got nothing to lose, right?
Right.
So that's why
Just
you
keep
go out
going.
there, making your content, making people laugh, you know, playing, you know, wishing people happy birthday, you know, with your
Is it your
guitar.
birthday today?
It is. No, I'm talking about a video that you did.
No, okay.
Oh, yeah.
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 That caught my attention. I was
Yeah.
like, man, what a great
No, birthdays are legendary at Paramify.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, man.
Those
The
are
one we try. I don't know. I think I've missed a few, but we aspire to make them
I love
good.
I love it. But
They're so good, man.
anyway, that's, yeah.
Are you still fixing trucks? So Reade fixes trucks.
I try to fix trucks. So I'm talking about like, because I just
Did you bring a truck here?
I did bring a truck here, and the check engine light is on. I have to replace the oil pump. I have to replace the oil pump. It's the same bloody truck that I had like back when I visited with you, you know, back in the summer. And so, because I had done like all this work on it and everything else, and like got it like a nice little lift on it and everything, and had to replace the bushings and the upper control arms and all this other crazy crap.
You probably
so-
can't explain to people why you do that to yourself, but you're like, I just have
I
to.
just don't want to. Yeah. A lot of people are like, why don't you just go out there and like get a brand new vehicle? I was like, I don't know, because this is paid off.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It's
Right,
silly.
yeah.
It's silly, but anyway. But yeah, that's I have to actually replace the oil pump on this one, and so with a because it's a Ram, and so I have to actually take off the front end all completely and be able to do that. And yeah.
I tell
It's
you, man,
insane.
if I didn't find my specific niche in automating compliance documentation, man, that would have been a terrible world, right? I'm like useless, like for like house chores. Like everything is like still broken at our house, right?
Oh, no.
Like we bought it.
Oh no.
Like I try, but
Yeah.
like I just get tired. I'm like, dang it, you know, this works good enough, right? And
Yeah.
you know, the farm economy, I would have been just begging for
Oh.
food everywhere.
Oh, dude.
Right.
My,
But you know what? Compliance documentation, that's my sweet spot.
That's
I
it.
just
That's
love
where
it,
that's
man.
where you found it. That's
Yeah,
great.
just-
Yeah, my wife gets onto me. She doesn't get onto me, but she talks about like, hey, I'm thinking. That's always like the best thing to hear from a spouse. Like, I've been thinking. And
Oh.
you know, one or two things. You know, you're going to lose a lot of money, right? Or it's going to be something that is going to be. You know this pain. Like it's
Yes.
like, hey, I've been thinking. All right, what have you been thinking
What are
about?
your thoughts on this? Oh.
She's like, I want some floating shelves over here. Okay, we can do that. But that means that we need to remove these cabinets. And if we remove these cabinets, they're a different color underneath. And I was thinking that we could actually repaint the entire interior
I've
of
had
the house.
we've had like those
Brutal.
those same conversations. I'm like, yeah, easy.
Oh man,
It's never easy,
No.
babe.
no.
It's never
You've
easy.
You've been watching too much HGTV.
Oh man.
So
Oh my gosh, dude. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
it's great. It looks
There's-
beautiful. It's so yeah.
to be fair, there's still a floating shelf that I have to install. Like,
Oh, man.
like this
I
week.
don't know.
So,
It
which
was-
is okay. Like I've been able to get to it, like because YouTube University is great.
Oh man.
so-
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
The last thing I did YouTube University was like learning how to play Eruption a long time ago, and I just
Oh,
stayed
yeah.
on. And I'm like, okay, I got it. That was years ago. I do not have time for YouTube University these days. But one day I will. And maybe I'll be a better do-it-yourself.
Oh, man.
Nope.
Don't want to overcommit.
I just don't even think it's gonna happen.
Don't want to overcommit.
Yeah, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Okay. So, one of the questions we ask, and we
Yes.
need to update this question, but I have not prepped it. So, in the fellowship, who is your guy or gal? in the
Erwin.
fellowship.
Erwin.
Okay, good.
Erwin.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And what are the principles that guide this decision?
So one of the first things I mean, it's very funny that you're asking this, and I don't know if you knew this before, but I'm listening to Fellowship right now.
Okay.
Oh,
with
nice.
The one that's by Andy Serkis.
Okay.
Right, so I'm listening to that one, and he's doing all the voices, and it's been going great so far. And I started the trilogy, the extended versions, with my boys.
Oh,
And
That's
so
awesome.
we're on like the Two Towers right now. And so anyway, So I choose Aragorn. The reason that I choose Aragorn is because of his tumultuous past, right? Because of everything about being that reluctant hero, right? Being the reluctant hero, and the fact is that he understands his own skills. He doesn't want to be part of it. He's one of the very few that can like withstand the power of the ring and still like not follow like the pride that his fathers that carried them to their deaths and everything.
Sildor,
blew it. Totally
blew it.
And so I love that in his ability to be able to get people to lead by example, servant leader.
Yeah. I love Aragorn too. We've talked about it a
strong
lot.
character, yeah, man.
Yeah.
He's good. Aragorn's my guy. Strider, his true name is Aragorn.
Yeah.
That's when he's in the, Frodo finds out about it. Oh, it's Aragorn, not Strider.
That's great.
Yeah, so
Anyway,
good, man.
Strong man.
So good.
I'm still sticking with Legolas though.
Yeah, Legolas can mount a horse like none other.
Exactly.
Walk on top of the snow, so light-footed, all those things.
He's
Yes,
amazing.
100%.
Dude.
Solid question.
I would like to ask real quick,
Yes.
for someone who's just starting their career,
Okay.
do you have any advice for them, especially if they want to start a career, say, in sales?
In sales?
Yeah.
So one of the first things is that looking back at it where it was like a thing that I was not comfortable with, and then I changed completely and said, hey, actually I would love to do sales and I love doing sales. One of the things that I would say to people is that being able to understand that failure and resilience are gonna have to be commonplace. You're gonna fail, and you're gonna feel like you are bugging people, and you're gonna feel like you have to get past that, and you have to be resilient. That there's gonna be multiple times where you're gonna fail. I saw somebody once that actually started to quantify how much money they made every time that they failed when that one yes finally hit, right? And so what you do is that you take the win, whatever it is, and you divide whatever your commission was amongst all the no's. And it is literally just a game if you look at it that way and be able to say like, hey, every single time that I lost, it was $4, or every time I lost, it was $20, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And
Cool.
making sure that when you do start going out and you do start doing sales, but one, make sure that you're resilient, make sure that you continue to go out and just understand, hey, what is, and asking the right questions in the interview process, right?
Right.
And saying, okay, how many of your people are actually meeting quota, right? Asking that question and saying, okay, well, we have this many people meeting quota. All right, cool. How many people are on your team? Because I had people that once said to me, oh, yeah, we get 80% that do quota. How big is your team? It's 4 people. And 80% are hitting quota. Okay, got it.
That's
right.
like math.
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had somebody who had said that to me.
Right.
Like, we've only got 4 people on the team. I was like, and 80% are hitting. Okay, well, what are the other people hitting? And the other people were not even close to like hitting quota at all. And so you're like, okay, well, then what is the close rate, right? What is the close rate? What is all these other things? And making sure you ask questions when you're stepping into it. But being able to know how to talk to others, being able to learn how to, I read a book, I made sure to read books, like you read one sales book, you read them all, but I actually read something on social engineering.
What's your favorite one?
My favorite social engineering book?
Yeah.
Or my favorite book?
Yeah, so both of them.
All right.
Let's hear the social engineering one.
All right, so Unmasking the Social Engineer. I cannot remember who it is, but if you put Unmasking the Social Engineer, you're going to find out.
Okay.
But that book is amazing. I really love that one a lot. It talks a lot about how you can be able to position your body, be able to talk to others, and using inflection, things like that. Obviously, I do have a little bit of experience as far as like interrogating others and just trying the right and the wrong thing, and being able to match energy and being able to mirror and things like that. You guys familiar with this, with mirroring?
Yeah.
Right. So when somebody's talking to you, you're talking to them like the exact same way, right? And you're kind of having all of those. Steepling is another thing if you want to be able to, if you're talking with your hands or something like that. Anyway, it talks a lot. It talks a lot about that type of stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, my other book I can't choose, but I can choose a series. Is the Wheel of Time series
Okay.
by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson.
Okay.
Mike really likes that series.
Mike does.
15
Mike Cook.
books.
Yeah.
Mike Cook.
Yeah.
Does Mike S? Well, we have to do last names now. We're at that point. You can't not just Mike. Yeah. There was a legendary Omniture billboard that said something like, if your name is like Mike, I don't know, and they crossed it out at Greg. If your name is Greg, we're hiring. Like they said, we're pretty cool. I don't know.
Awesome.
Pretty funny.
But that's the other one. But I mean, that's what I would kind of start off with. I started off
Awesome.
with that, but then it was my biggest piece of advice: just understand that life is going to get like you're going to have to grind,
Yep.
and
beautiful.
making sure that you ask the right questions when you are looking out for jobs, and gain as much knowledge as you can about your client.
Micro question on that.
Yeah.
Do you find that it helps when you change your mindset from like selling to like, hey, you're trying to help them, right? You have something
So-
that's really important.
A really big thing is that Ian Koniak, I was listening to one of his podcasts he was on with Andy Paul,
Uh-huh.
and Ian Koniak talked a little bit about that piece about just like, hey, first of all, he broke it down with the numbers. And he said, like, break it down in the numbers about how much you have to make as far as like your quota is concerned, what you have to do in order leading up to that. Break it down and make it simple. Make it simple math. But then the other piece is that changing your mindset to that of, I want to build a relationship with that person. And this is when I was like literally taking like my first drive from North Ogden to Lehigh, taking that drive, and I was listening to this, and I'm like, that resonated with me so much that when I changed it to actually being interested in that person and interested in their journey and understanding like where they came from and wanting to get down to what their motivation was and helping them get to that point, because everybody can find out a need, but what's the pain that's driving that need? What's the motivation behind that need? And if you can find that, a lot of times it's very similar to, it helps you build empathy for what they're trying to do,
Right.
and then changes that mindset to be able to say like, well then, let's try to build this up together and let's
You're
try to figure this out.
Trying to help people.
That's a very good question, and that's
Right.
something that helped me a lot when I was kind of like building my own sales methodology and about the way that I sell best, is being able to understand that and
Nice.
making sure that it's not about trying to like make as much money as possible. It's about trying to build a relationship, because you'll realize at the end of the day, like money's going to be fleeting, but the relationships that you build with other people, like
Yeah.
you talked about with me, like,
Yeah.
is going to be more than anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
They'll follow you around.
100%.
Well, I'm glad to have to be your friend, Reade. It's been awesome having you on, and who knows, maybe we do it again.
Yeah.
Maybe we change the question from Lord of the Rings and we shift into Star Wars, hopefully.
I'm down for Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah. If people are okay with it, I love Star Wars. Okay. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate you,
Glad to
dude.
be here.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys.
All right,
Thank you, Reade.
let's go. Paramify. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Awesome. Thank you.